Okay, so we're going to be looking at the Book of Obadiah, which is just before the Book of Jonah. But little context before we jump in. Obadiah is the shortest book in the Old Testament.
Oh, never mind the source.
It tells us of Yahweh's judgment on Judah's neighbor, Judah being a nation, okay, not just a person, neighbor being Edom. Okay, so we're going to work out who Edom is. We're going to learn a little bit more about Judah. We're going to learn about this judgment coming. This book tells us that injustice does not go by unrecognized by God or Yahweh. And Obadiah, the name, I've got it up here, means servant of Yahweh. Okay, sometimes in the Bible you will find it written YHWH. That's their short way of saying Yahweh as well. But this is how we've kind of done it here. So, we're going to go through this book together. There are not many verses. We've got 21 verses to go through. I've split it into 3 sections to try and keep it, workable, basically. I can't do 5 out of 21. It doesn't really work for me. So 3, that's what we've got for today. So today we're going to start with section 1, verses 1 to 9, the coming judgment of Edom. Okay, the vision of Obadiah, thus saith the Lord concerning Edom. We have heard a rumor from the Lord, and an ambassador is sent among the heathen. Arise ye, and let us rise up against her in battle. Behold, I have made thee small among the heathen. Thou art greatly despised. The pride of thine heart have deceived thee. Thou that dwellest in the clefts of the rock, whose habitation is high, that saith in his heart, who shall bring me down to the earth? If you're not understanding what's being said right now, it's basically there's going to be a battle. We're going to go against these guys. And the people who are going to be getting fought against are basically saying, who can beat us? We've got such a great fortress. We live in such a cool place. Who can beat us? Verse 4, Thou exile thyself as the eagle, and thou set thyself, they nest amongst the stars. Thence will I bring thee down, saith the Lord. If thieves come to thee, if robbers by night, how art thou cut off? Would they not have stolen till they had given enough? If the grape gatherers came to thee, would they not leave some grapes? How are the things of Esau searched out? How are his hidden things sought up? All the men of thy confederacy have brought thee even to the border. The men that were at peace with thee have deceived thee and prevailed against thee. They that eat thy bread have led a wound unto thee. There is none understanding in him. Verse 8, Shall I not in that day, saith the Lord, even destroy the wise men out of Edom, and understanding out of the mount of Esau? Verse 9, And thy mighty men, O Teman, shall be dismayed to the end that every one of the mount of Esau may be cut off by slaughter. This is aggressive. First 9 verses, what I learned from the first time I read this was battle, judgment, aggressiveness. Lots of slaughter. Lots of people to die. Okay? Not a nice way to go here. So, but it starts off verse 1, the vision of Obadiah. So, we already know the Hebrew name Obadiah mentioned before means worshipper of Yahweh or servant of Yahweh, okay? There are 13 different Obadiahs mentioned in the Old Testament, and one of these may be the Obadiah who wrote this book. The thing is, we just can't know for sure. Right? But there are 13 people. It's the same thing that we read about when we studied through Jude. We know Jude wasn't actually the name, it was Judas. But if we used the name Judas, people would not have connected that to being a good news, a book that should belong in the Bible. And they used Jude instead to get around that. So Obadiah, 13 times in the Old Testament. There was an Obadiah who was an officer in King Ahab's court, and hid God's prophets in a cave. You can read that in 1 Kings 18:3. There was an Obadiah who was sent out by King Jehoshaphat of Judah to teach the law in the cities of Judah in 2 Chronicles 34 and 12. And there was also a priest in Nehemiah 10:5 who was also called Obadiah. Okay, those are 3 that I could find that, that I could kind of remember. And I was like, I can't find the other 10. But they're in there somewhere. I'm sure if you did a Google search, you'd be able to find that, okay? So Obadiah's prophecy is unique because he doesn't deal with Judah and Israel much at all. He's not really talking about, what's going to happen to the nation of Israel. He's talking about the downfall of a different nation, okay? His focus is on the sin of Edom and the judgment coming upon them. He's focusing on the bad here. But he's saying judgment is going to happen. This is how it's going to go down. So, who is Edom? Anyone got any ideas? Has anyone heard of this name before? Not Adam, Edom. E-D-O-M. Any ideas? No? You want me to help you out here? Good. There you go. So the Edomites, or the nation of Edom, were the people descended from Esau. Does anyone know who Esau is? Who's Esau?
Hairy guy.
Hairy guy, there you go. The hairy guy. The son of Isaac and Rebekah and the brother of Jacob. We can read about him in Genesis 25, 19 to 34. Esau was nicknamed Edom. Okay? What color was his hair?
Red.
What do you think Edom means?
Red.
Red. So it's kind of funny. So we can read Genesis 25:25. Edom was a hairy red baby. Red hair all over him. He was a hairy baby. So Edom means red. And that's where we get the name Edomites or Edom, the nation of Edom, from Esau that way, okay? So Esau eventually settled in the area of Mount Seir and absorbed a people group called the Horites in Genesis 36, 8 through 43. So you can read about this process of getting to Mount Seir, but there's a different mount that's quite significant in the Bible as well. Mount Seir is a good one, but there's a different Zion, right? You can see a comparison here between Edom and the nation of Judah. One has a Mount Seir, one has a Mount Zion. One is a good people, one is a bad people. We're going to read about that a little bit more. But when Israel came out of Egypt and wanted to pass through the land of the Edomites to enter into the promised land, the Edomites wouldn't let them. So this sets up this whole picture, okay? First thing, they settled in, they've absorbed a different nation. They've taken over a different nation, okay? Second thing they do is when Israel could try to go through the promised land through Edom, they wouldn't let them. So they've absorbed, they've taken over, and now they're restricting the access to the promised land for this nation. We can read that in Numbers 20, 14, and 21. The Edomites opposed Saul and were conquered under David and Solomon. 1 Samuel 14, 47, 2 Samuel 8, 14, and 1 Kings 9, 26 all talk about this battle that happened. And also, in the days of King Jehoshaphat of Judah, Edom joined Moab and Ammon, who were two other kings, to attack Judah. But the Lord fought for Judah and defeated them. 2 Chronicles 21 through 27. So I hope you're getting this idea about who the Edomites are. They're not people who are going with the good guys. They're people who are trying to stand up for the bad things instead. In 2 Kings 8, 16 to 22, we can read that Edomites successfully rebelled against King Jehoram of Judah. They're rebellious. They like to take over places. They like to be in charge. They want to be a true power. They go with other people to try and take over places. But then in 2 Kings 14, 9 to 11, we can read that King Amaziah of Judah brought them back under control of subjugation, So these guys are trying to be a free country, but they're trying to be a bad free country, 2 Chronicles 28:17 tells us again of a time that they attacked Judah in the days of King Ahaz. There's a lot. I wrote down a lot of these. I wrote down a lot, but basically the final straw here was the Edomites fought side by side. You're going to be surprised about who they fought alongside here. They fought side by side with Jews in the rebellion against Rome in AD 66 to 70. This is a historical moment here. But the thing is, Rome won. The Edomites were crushed. They were destroyed and were never to be heard of as a people again. But the thing is, what we're going to read about in Obadiah are the predictions, the prophecies to say that was going to happen in the first place. So Obadiah 10 talks about this, and Obadiah 18 talks about this as well. Notice I'm not saying Obadiah 1:10, it's one chapter. That's the whole book. It's really small. But it's all about the fall of Edom, So Obadiah gave us a report from the Lord announcing that God would bring a nation against Edom in battle. And as a result of the coming battle, Obadiah told us that God would rise up nations against Edom, and that Edom would be made small. Be made small, okay? Because of the pride of Edom, verse 3, the pride of thine heart have deceived thee, okay? You've been deceived to think you're important. You've been deceived to think that you're bigger than what you are. You're more powerful than what you are. It's not true. You've been deceived. You're believing something that's a lie. We've all heard the saying, pride comes before the fall. Well, this is a basic example of that in the Bible right now. The thing is that the nation of Edom didn't have much to be proud of. It didn't really. They were a small nation. They were relatively poor. Okay, that's why they needed all these allies. And they were kind of insignificant, really, as a nation. However, what they could be proud of was the area that they lived in. And I looked this up, and I've got a picture to show you guys in a second. But it was an area of great fortification. Okay, and it tells us this in verse 3, thou that dwellest in the clefts of the rock. Not Dwayne The Rock Johnson, I'm on about a mountain, okay? So, their pride came from the defense they had from the rock formation around them. You can't defeat us. You think you can, but you can't, because we're literally built into the side of a mountain. Their pride caused them to question, who shall bring me down to the ground? That's what it says. Who shall bring me down to the ground? Verse 3 there. Or who can possibly kill us? Who can possibly wipe us out? Who can possibly defeat us? Who can even get close? Well, God answers that question in verse 4. Okay, it says, though thou exalt thyself as the eagle, high and flying around in the sky, undefeatable because you're untouchable. That's what they're using the eagle as here. A bird that flies so high that you cannot touch it until it chooses to come down. Right? It's saying it's magnificent. It's saying it's powerful. It's saying it's untouchable. And then he says, and though thou set thy nest amongst the stars, so high up there. You build your nest so high up there, you think you're the highest of the high, you're the best of the best, the most important. He said, I will bring thee down. I will bring you down. You think you're all the way up here, I'm going to bring you all the way down to here. Their pride got to their heads. They asked the question. God answered the question. So, the city of Petra was the capital city of Edom. And it was literally carved into a rock. Okay? You heard of Petra before? Go for it. What are you going to say?
Isn't Petra in Iran or Iraq?
What do you think?
Isn't it in
It is
Iraq?
just east of the Dead Sea. That's where this settlement is built into, okay? So you can see here, there is this amazing thing carved into the side of a mountain. And you can imagine trying to get an army down there. Well, the thing is, what they had before here, you can see there's an offshoot here, and you can see there's a tiny offshoot here. It was like a canal, like a tiny little tunnel that would run through. No water ran there. It was all inside the rock. They had wells in there. They had little tunnels escaping everywhere in case people came and attacked. But imagine pulling up with a ginormous army and being like, we're going to take you down. Quick, get the fire arrows. And there's nothing to set fire to because it's built into a rock. Well, okay, we'll just flush them out. Okay, great, but there's tunnels leading out everywhere. These guys are kind of undefeatable here. Literally carved into a rock. You can see why they were so confident, why they were so prideful. Because actually, they had a really sweet setup. They had a really good setup. The Edomites also boasted of their wisdom and their alliances as well. But God saw this. God saw the pride. God saw the boastfulness, and God replied, you exalt yourselves high in the air like an eagle. You nest amongst the stars. You think you're that important, but I will bring you down. And this is the sobering truth about the power of God. You can think this is security. You can think this is an amazing place to live. You can think you've got it all sussed, all ready to go. You've figured it all out. You know how to live and live well. But the sobering truth is that God can and will bring us to the ground if we need to be lowered. The Edomites were literally built into the earth. They had made themselves secure as possible in this amazing fortress, which looks incredible. This picture was from a year ago, so it's still there. Okay, you can go and visit it. Go to the Dead Sea, go east, you'll find it, I promise. But you can see these tourist groups and how small they are and how big this place must be. These guys knew how to do something incredible here, but they boasted about it. They antagonized, they poked the bear, and it just so happened the bear was God, and God said, "You're gone. Don't poke me." Okay? Let's get rid of that for a second. So, verse 5. If thieves come to thee, if robbers by night, would they have not stolen till they had enough? If the grape gatherers came to thee, would they not leave some grapes? So something to think about here is Jeremiah 49 and Obadiah, the book of Obadiah, are very similar. They use very similar illustrations. And this is one of the verses that is very similar. Okay, the only difference is Obadiah reverses the references. Jeremiah starts off by saying, hey, if the grape gatherers come along, can you remember what happens, what Jesus taught about the crops in the field? Remember when we were teaching through Ruth and what was happening, what they would leave in the fields for those people who are widows, those who are homeless, those who are orphans? They left like a chunk of their crop out there so that people could still eat. And what he's saying here is, if thieves came by night, if the grape gatherers came, wouldn't they leave something? They would still leave something. They would take their fill, but then they would leave something, right? But now it's saying, he's using this as a comparison to say, actually, what's going to happen to you is thieves are going to come, and they're not going to stop. They're going to take everything. Those grape gatherers who are going to come along, and by law, should technically leave a ton of grapes for the homeless, for the widows, for the people who can't afford it, for the beggars. They would usually leave a part of the crop for those to still eat. Not this time. It is all going to be taken away from you. You're not going to have anything. And he's making these promises, saying basically, you're going to have nothing left. I'm going to lower you. I'm going to take it all away. Your pride will cause you to fall. There is going to be nothing left. Nothing. Even the defenses that you are so proud of will not stand. They're not going to defend you anymore. And we know actually the defenses did stand. You see the picture I just had. They're still there, but they didn't do their job. They didn't do their job. Okay. Verse 6, how are the things of Esau searched out? How are his hidden things sought up? So the name of Esau in this verse right here stands for the whole country of Edom. They're basically saying the things of Edom, the things of Esau, all the things that are attached to him, they're going to be sought up. They're going to be taken away. Just like the name Jacob is sometimes used to refer to the nation of Israel. Okay, you can see that in Hosea 12:2. It says the nation of Jacob. That's the nation of Israel instead. Okay. Verse 7. When God brings the judgment on Edom, they will know, because all of those people, all of those alliances they have put their faith in will turn on them. All the men of thy confederacy have brought thee even to the border. The men that were at peace with thee have deceived thee. They will turn on you. They will double cross you. Edom will be abandoned. The alliances that you are so proud of will fall and come to nothing. In verse 8, the Edomites were known for their great wisdom, but God will still bring great judgment that even their wise men will be destroyed. The Edomites were proud of their reputation for wisdom, but God would break their pride and bring them low. We can read about that specifically in Job 5:12 and Jeremiah 49:7 about just the importance and the arrogance of these Edomites by saying, we are so wise. Come look at us. Much wiser than you. Much wiser. That pride really trips them up here. In verse 9 it says, thy mighty men, O Teman, shall be dismayed to the end that every one of the amount of Esau may be cut off by slaughter. Psalm 76:5 is a good reference for that as well if you want to check that out. But all your mighty men, all your mighty cities, all your wise cities, such as Teman. That's one of the main cities. In the Bible, that has a reference of the wisest people came from that city. But they shall be dismayed. They shall be confused. They will be destroyed. All of those who come from the mountains of Esau or Mount Seir will be cut off by slaughter. Pretty aggressive. But what God's saying is anyone who is connected to this nation, this is what's going to happen. Okay? It is the coming judgment on Edom. That's the whole point of this section. Okay? And why? Why is there a judgment coming? Well, this is section 2 here. Section 2, verses 10 through 16. Edom mistreated his brother. He mistreated his brother. For thy violence against thy brother Jacob, shame shall cover thee, and thou shalt be cut off forever. In the day that thou stoodest on the other side, in the day that the strangers carried away captive his forces, and foreigners entered into his gates, and cast lots upon Jerusalem, even thou wast as one of them. For thou shouldest not have looked on the day of thy brother in that day, that he became a stranger. Neither shouldest thou have rejoiced over the children of Judah in the day of their destruction. Neither shouldest thou have spoken proudly in the day of distress. Thou shouldest not have entered into the gate of my people in the day of their calamity. Yea, thou shouldest not have looked on their affliction in the day of their calamity, nor have laid hands on their substance in the day of their calamity. You shouldn't have done it, guys. You messed up. Neither shouldest thou have stood in the crossway to cut off those of his that did escape. Neither shouldest thou have delivered up those of those that did remain in the day of distress. Verse 15, for the day of the Lord is near upon all the heathen. As thou hast done, it shall be done unto thee. Thy reward shall return upon thine own head. Verse 16, for as ye have drunk upon my holy mountain, so shall all the heathen drink continually. Yea, they shall drink, and they shall swallow down, and they shall be as though they had not been. Edom mistreated his brother. That is why there is coming judgment. Okay? Verse 10 and 11, we can read, as these two verses are read, we can see that there is a reason to why Edom is being judged. It's not just out of the blue. It's not saying, hey, you're ginger, so I'm going to judge you. No, there's some bad stuff that's happened here. That's why this judgment is coming. Okay? There is a reason. In 2 Kings 25, we can read about Jerusalem being destroyed. But what we do not read about is the involvement of Edom. Okay? So the reason to why there is judgment is because of the lack of action taken to help his brother. It tells of Edom just standing at the side whilst Jerusalem is destroyed, as strangers carried away slaves and servants, as foreigners entered its gates and lots were cast upon Jerusalem. You stood by the side. As it was being pillaged, as it was being burnt, as it was being destroyed, you stood and watched. Psalm 137:7, Ezekiel 25:12-14, and Lamentations 4:21 and 22 tells us of this moment happening. The offense of the whole nation appears to be standing idly by and not helping. Guys, this happens too much nowadays. This happens way too much. Have you ever seen those videos on YouTube? And I've seen a lot of them, and it makes me really upset. Two guys fighting in the middle of the street, and instead of no one's breaking it up, they've all got their phones up. People robbing a Walgreens, and instead of actually stopping the theft, they're just filming it. Look at him go. This is great. There is a judgment for not doing something. There is something that happens if we don't actually act in righteousness. And I think that's the issue here. We can read the Book of Obadiah and think, man, the nation of Edom, they got it bad. They got it really bad. You know what? Whilst Jerusalem was on fire, whilst babies were being carried away to be slaves, whilst people were being murdered, you stood by with your phone out and was like, I'm going to put it on Instagram. I'm going to Facebook Live it so everyone can see. That's not helping. That's not looking after your brother. That's not looking after other people. There is a judgment that comes from that. We can read that the Babylonians took the treasures of the temple before burning it down in 2 Kings 25:13-17. We know that that's something that happens. In Daniel, we read about that as we studied through Daniel. When the new king came in, what did he do? He took the treasures and he moved it to the temple of his God. He changed the culture, he changed the names, he changed the landscape completely and said, this is how we're going to do it now. I'm going to get rid of your stuff, I'm going to put my stuff in there instead. And that's what happened. But Edom, the nation, did nothing to help, but instead they did something worse. They rejoiced in the distress of Jerusalem. Verse 12, Edom's sin started with doing nothing, and then their pride came up. Right? 12, it says, but thou shouldest not have looked on the day of thy brother in the day when he became a stranger. Basically he's saying, I don't know that guy, I'm not going to help him anymore. Neither shouldest thou have rejoiced over the children of Judah in the day of their destruction. Neither shouldest thou have spoken proudly in the day of distress. Well, it's not happening to us, guys. Why? Because we've got a legit fortress over here. No one's going to come and burn us down. No one's going to come and pillage from us. No one's going to take over our place because we've got a great place over here. We're so good. We're so secure and safe. Then in verse 13, we can read that they should not have laid hands on the substances in the day of the calamity. What does that mean? You shouldn't have laid hands on the substances. Anyone got any ideas? What do you think, you guys? Laid hands on the substances.
Like, don't steal from people while there's a war going on.
Right? It's like, not only didn't you help, you watched, you filmed the whole thing, and then you're like, throwing away, let's get in there quick. I see some cool stuff. I need that new Xbox. Right? And they ran in there and they just took their stuff whilst this battle was going on. Whilst in their time of need, they stole the possessions of Judah. In this craziness, in this battle, in the distress, in the idly by standing, just nothing's going on until it's going to better what I need. I need a new thing. I should go get that. This could make me rich. Let me get in there. They took so they would be rich whilst Jerusalem burned. That's basically it. And 14, to add extra insult to injury, the people of Edom then encountered survivors. Right? It says in 14, neither shouldest thou have stood in the crossway, the way that they got out, to cut off those of his that did escape. They encountered survivors of the battle, people fleeing for their lives, people needing to get away, and they either killed them, cut off, that's what it says, or they captured them to make them slaves. When Judah was most vulnerable, Edom joined in with the attack. We can see in verses 12 to 14 that there are 8 statements that Edom should have obeyed. Okay? Remember, this hasn't happened yet. This is a prophecy. And if they had just obeyed what was being said by Obadiah, something might have changed. But there are 8 you should not have statements in those 2 verses. You should not have looked. You should not have looked on the day of thy brother in the day that he became a stranger. You shouldn't have looked at him as a stranger. You should have stayed looking at him as a brother. You should not have rejoiced in someone else's distress. You should not have spoken proudly about how good your kingdom is whilst the other one's on fire. You should not have entered the gate of a different city, of a different place. You should not have looked at the affliction in the day of their calamity. You should not have laid hands on the substance. You should not have stood in the crossway. And you should not have captured those or killed those who were fleeing. 8, you should not have statements right there. It's pretty clear. Don't do it. Verse 15, for the day of the Lord is near upon all the heathen. As thou hast done, it shall be done unto thee. Thy reward shall return upon thine own head. Ezekiel 30, verse 3, you can check that out if you want an extra reference there. But the day of Yahweh is a time of judgment against the nations of the whole world for their opposition to his rule. God wants Edom to know that though distress and calamity came upon Judah, it will also come upon Edom as well. That day is near. And God promised a simple judgment on the nation of Edom. And he basically says, it shall, as thou hast done, it shall be done unto thee. What you have done here, it's going to happen to you. Right? Treat others as you expect to be treated. That's a kind of common rule, right? And he's saying there's 8 thou shalt not rules. Well, you broke every single one of them. So now what happened there is now going to happen to you. It's the way it is. No more. No less, but exactly what's going to happen to here is going to happen to you. What they did to Judah will also be done to them. Verse 16, for as ye have drunk upon my holy mountain, so shall all the heathen drink continually. Yea, they shall drink, and they shall swallow down, and they shall be as though they had not been. The holy mountain talked about here is Mount Zion, the Temple Mount in Jerusalem. And the metaphor of the cup of wrath, cup that they're going to keep drinking from, is mentioned in Jeremiah 25:15. But it's something to think about here. It says, you drank upon my holy mountain. You've been there before. You know where it is. You know what's on fire. You know Jerusalem. And now you're going to continue to drink that judgment. And you're going to swallow it. And it's going to be as though you have not been. Like it's going to be like you've never existed. I've already told you what happened to the Edomites when they went up against Rome. They got destroyed, they got smashed, they got wiped out. It was as if they never existed. Not a person survived. What was promised came true. Okay. Final section here. Israel's final triumph. Section 3, verses 17 to 21. 17. But upon Mount Zion shall be deliverance, and there shall be holiness, and the house of Jacob shall possess their possessions. And the house of Jacob shall be a fire, and the house of Joseph a flame, and the house of Esau for stubble. And they shall kindle in them, and devour them, and there shall not be any remaining of the house of Esau, for the Lord hath spoken. And they of the south shall possess the mount of Esau, and they of the plain, the Philistines, and they shall possess the fields of Ephraim, and the fields of Samaria, and Benjamin shall possess Gilead. And the captivity of this host of the children of Israel shall possess that of Canaan, the Canaanites, even unto Zephyrath, and the captivity of Jerusalem, which is in Sepharad, shall possess the cities of the south. Verse 21, and the saviors shall come up on Mount Zion to judge the mount of Esau, and the kingdom shall be the Lord's. Israel's final triumph tells us that there will be deliverance. But notice that it's not deliverance from Israel. Israel is not the one handing out deliverance here. It's from God. It's God who's going to do the delivering. Israel will be blessed through this, and we've just read about possessions that they'll gain. But it's basically saying that because they trusted in God and not themselves, they will be blessed. There will be deliverance. The trials, the struggles of the people of God are only temporary because there will be deliverance from evil to good. Okay? What a promise. What a promise. Upon Mount Zion shall be deliverance. On the Temple Mount that's just been burned down. In the middle of Jerusalem, which has just been destroyed. On that place, in that space right there, there will be deliverance. It's an amazing promise. In verse 18, it tells us that the house of Jacob shall be a fire, and the house of Joseph a flame, and the house of Esau shall be stubble, shall be kindled like that. How do you start a fire? Get some kindling, get some bigger sticks than that, and a little bit more bigger sticks, right? And what they're saying is you're not even going to be a big stick. You're going to be the start of the fire. You're going to be the stuff that gets thrown on the bottom and gets burnt up real fast. Basically, the whole house of Esau will be devoured by fire. Verse 19 and 20, it tells us about the south shall possess the mountains of Esau. And basically, the territory closest to the nation of Esau, whoever's closest to that will get that area. That's what they're saying right there. It's getting divvied up and saying, your kingdom that you're so proud of will not even be yours anymore. It's going to be given to other kingdoms. Not just one in charge, but they're all going to be split up. Notice it says the Philistines will get an area, and Benjamin shall possess Gilead. Children of Israel will get Canaanites. The captivity of Jerusalem, which is in Sepharad, shall possess the cities to the south. There's 4 or 5 different nations here who are gaining from the Edomites being destroyed. And that's all part of this deliverance. There will be no more evil in this land, and you'll be spread about everywhere else. That's the way it's going to be. You will lose all land, all power, all life. All the way from the lowlands to the fields to the coastal villages. And in the final verse here, 21, it says, Saviors shall come up on Mount Zion. The word saviors could also mean the word deliverer. Deliverers will come to the Mount Zion to judge the Mount of Esau. Saviors to the Mount of Zion, but the kingdom of Esau shall be destroyed. To judge the mountains of Esau, all of them, the whole kingdom to be judged. And that final line, and the kingdom shall be the Lord's. The reference there, Psalm 22:28. The prophecy of Obadiah, even as brief as it is, ends on this high note. The kingdom will be God's. It won't be humans. It won't be flawed humans, sinful humans to hold on to, prideful humans, boastful humans. It will be God's. And God knows how to care for his people, even in times of trial. Think about this: slavery, attack, fire, theft, murder, battle, everything like it. Even all those times of suffering and of hardship, we know that there will be an eventual deliverance, because that's what's promised here. On the mount, at the Temple Mount in the middle of Jerusalem, in Mount Zion, there will be deliverance, because saviors will come and judge. Well, I tell you, Jesus is that savior. Jesus has come, and he's done what he said he would do. God is the judge, but thankfully we have Jesus that stands in front of us. So that when God gets to do the judging, he sees perfect Jesus instead of sinful Jamie, and I can have life everlasting through him. That's the same for you guys. If you accept Jesus Christ into your life, into your heart, and know him as King, know him as Savior, that's what can happen with you. I've got 3 final points, and then we'll be done with Obadiah. First one here, are we allowing pride to enter our lives? Are we allowing pride to enter our lives? Pride comes before the fall. We've all heard that saying, right? Do not let pride be a stumbling block to change our walk with Jesus, because actually that's a big thing. Do you think you're better than you are? Do you think you don't need Jesus? Do you think you don't need to listen to the preaching or pray to God? Like, why would I need to do that? It's a waste of time. I tell you, pride comes before the fall. Everyone will or has fallen, right? We have all been prideful. We have all been sufferers of this sin. It's just the way it is. We all need Jesus. Okay. Point 2, how we treat others is huge. Do you step in when there's something wrong going on? Is there a bullying happening, bullying right in front of you? Are you a person to walk away and just ignore it? Or are you a person to step in and say, no, stop treating this person bad? We notice that Edom, the whole nation is judged from just standing back and being like, nothing's going on here. That's why they have judgment on them. How we treat others is huge. As Christians, we must be looking to help, to love, and to support. But we have to be looking to have a good testimony as well. Did you stop that suffering? Did you show love to that homeless person? Did you give them something that they needed to make their day that much better? Did you show them Jesus? How did you do that? Final point here. The kingdom shall be the Lord's. The Bible tells us every single knee will bow. Every tongue will confess that God is God's, that he is king. What he wants is for him to not have to force that. What he wants is the kingdom of our hearts to be his. I can tell you the Romans Road verses if you want, but I can just tell you this way. The kingdom, that is you. He wants you to be his. The kingdom of your heart, the kingdom of your life, he wants you to be part of his family. Don't make judgment come on you because of the way that you treated others or the way you neglected God. Understand that there is something on offer here that is incredible, and that is being part of God's family. That's what we've got. Guys, that is the book of Obadiah. Good job. Who wants to pray for us?